A train is about to cross this bridge. The river is 359 meters below. The wind can become powerful enough to throw ordinary objects through the air. The surrounding mountains can shake during an earthquake. And if you dropped your phone from here, you would have enough time to regret not buying the insurance. This is India's Chenab Railway Bridge, the world's highest railway arch bridge. It stands around 35 meters taller than the Eiffel Tower. But engineers didn't build it this high to break a record. They built it because the railway had run into a rather inconvenient obstacle: the Himalayas. For decades, connecting the Kashmir Valley with India's wider railway network was an enormous challenge. Roads through the mountains could be affected by snow, landslides, and difficult weather. A railway could provide a more dependable connection. There was only one small problem. The planned route reached the Chenab River and discovered a gorge so deep that a normal bridge suddenly looked like a very bad idea. Building support columns from the riverbed would have meant walking hundreds of meters below the future railway. That is not a construction site. That is the beginning of a supervillain's secret headquarters. Engineers needed a bridge that could cross the gorge without depending on a giant central pillar. Their answer was a steel arch stretching between the two mountains. An arch is incredibly strong because it redirects weight outward and downward into its foundations. Think of it like two people leaning against each other. If both are positioned correctly, they remain standing. If one moves 5 centimeters, everyone meets the floor. That meant the bridge's foundations had to be anchored securely into the mountains. But building the arch created another problem. How do you place enormous steel sections above a gorge when an ordinary crane cannot reach them? The engineers effectively installed cable crane systems across the valley. These cables acted like aerial delivery tracks, carrying steel components out over the gorge. Then, construction began from both sides. One section at a time, the two halves of the arch extended away from the mountains and toward each other. For a long period, each unfinished half was hanging over empty space. This is called cantilever construction. I call it trusting the engineering calculations far more than I trust myself. The real moment of tension came when the two sides approached the center. After years of design, fabrication, and mountain construction, the final pieces had to meet with extraordinary precision. Too large a gap would be a disaster. An overlap would also be a disaster. Close enough is acceptable when assembling inexpensive furniture. It is not acceptable 315 meters above a river. In April 2021, the two halves were finally connected, completing the enormous steel arch. But closing the arch did not finish the bridge. Engineers still had to construct the supports above it, install the railway deck, lay the track, and test the entire structure. Altogether, the bridge is 1,315 meters long and contains tens of thousands of tons of steel, and every part had to survive far more than the weight of a train. Quick pause. If you enjoy stories about people building things that initially sound impossible, please like this video, share it with someone who loves engineering, and subscribe to Kliqora. It tells YouTube that humans still enjoy bridges, even when no superhero is fighting on top of them. Now, back to the dangerous part. The bridge sits in a region where strong winds and earthquakes must be considered. Official project information says it was designed for winds of approximately 260 kilometers per hour and given a design life of 120 years. Specialists also studied how it would behave during earthquakes. The steel structure needed enough strength to carry trains, but also enough flexibility to deal with movement and changing temperatures, because metal expands when it becomes hot and contracts when it becomes cold. A bridge this large cannot simply say, "I don't believe in weather."
Security was another consideration. Indian authorities say the bridge was designed with blast resistance, with assistance from the country's Defense Research and Development Organization. It was also planned so that under certain damage scenarios, trains could continue moving at a restricted speed, rather than the entire structure immediately becoming unusable.
But the most important part of this project is not its height. It is where the railway goes. The Chenab Bridge forms part of the Udhampur-Srinagar-Baramulla rail link, a 272-kilometer project that includes dozens of tunnels and hundreds of bridges. Together, these structures provide an all-weather railway connection into the Kashmir Valley. For passengers, that can mean easier travel. For businesses and farmers, it can mean more reliable movement of goods. For tourism, it places one of the world's most dramatic railway journeys on the map. And for engineers, it proves that the mountains do not always decide where a railway must stop. The Chenab Bridge looks impossible because our eyes compare it with an ordinary bridge. But it was not created by one impossible invention. It was created by solving thousands of smaller problems. How to reach the site, how to anchor the foundations, how to transport the steel, how to suspend sections over the gorge, how to protect the structure from wind, cold, and earthquakes, and finally, how to make two giant pieces of steel built from opposite mountains meet in the middle. That may be the real lesson of the bridge. Impossible often means the problem is too large to solve all at once, so engineers divide it into pieces. Then they carry those pieces across a gorge using cables. Would you ride across this bridge while looking down at the river? Or would you suddenly become extremely interested in the floor of the train? Tell us in the comments.